that better?
Yes.
Okay, I'll just speak into it. Yeah, thank you. So my name is my name is Aaron Mashano. I also live here in Bali, and seen some of you probably ecstatic dance right here in this room sometime in the past. But today I wanted to really introduce an extraordinary man. I've had a great privilege. I don't actually have a bio, but I'll just tell you what I know about him, and maybe I will come across more authentic. But I met David through Lynn, and what's really fascinating with David, for me anyway, is that he's done some really amazing things in a short period of time. I'm not sure if some of you guys were here for the Ubud Indigenous Festival that was here just some time back. Is anyone here for that? It's a really well-run event bringing together indigenous cultures from all over the world. And what really impressed me wasn't necessarily the fact that they were just indigenous from Bali, they were just from Indonesia, the logistics that might have taken someone. And then the more we spent time hearing that he's just really passionate about indigenous cultures, the environment, but just passionate about life as well. So I was invited to ask him a few questions, and I'm just as curious probably about him as maybe most of you are in the room. So I wanted to take that opportunity to spend this to ask you some questions you know and some questions you might not. So is there anything else you want me to add in terms of introduction?
Well, no, just to thank everybody very much for coming. Wow, you never quite know with these things, you know, how many people are going to come along. And of course, thanks to my lovely wife here, Steph, for many of her friends are here, and those that have came to the familiar faces that came to the Indigenous Film Festival and the celebration. So thanks so much for supporting those events and you know, for coming along today. So of course, thanks to Aaron for taking on this responsibility of asking some questions and things like that. And obviously we'll take some questions from the audience a bit later. So yeah, for me this is, I guess, quite a personal, you know, well, not discussion, but you know, personal in terms of talking a bit about my life and what motivates me, I guess, to do the things that I do, and some of the influences and things like that, and then maybe talk a bit about the, you know, why I came to Bali, what I love about Bali, and you know, set up a business here and how that all happened and so forth.
So maybe we'll dive straight in. I think we have questions for about 40 minutes or so.
Yeah, I think there's about I've got an 8-minute slideshow with music at the end, just to show it's a dedication to the Dayak people of Kalimantan. So we'll finish with that. It's about 8 minutes. We have some time for it.
So maybe just for people here, could you maybe tell us a bit about how you got to Bali and I guess what's your number one passion?
Yeah, well, I guess that probably starts in terms of my first connection with Indonesia, and that was I used to work for United Parcel Service. I'm sure most of you will be familiar, particularly Americans, with the brown trucks that deliver packages all over America and the world. So I came to Indonesia as the country manager to Jakarta back in 2000, the end of 2000, and I'd never been to Indonesia before that, or Bali. And I still never forget the day when I first arrived in Bali. It was back then, and I came down on my first business trip really to Bali, and the sales guy picked me up at the airport and took me somewhere around Ubud, I guess, to visit a client who was exporting some things to overseas. And I just never forget that that sort of first vision of driving down the road, and there was a couple of women walking, balancing the offerings on their head. And I guess I didn't know much about Bali at that point. I'd read a bit of things. It didn't actually have a lot of appeal back in those days, probably because mostly what you heard about Bali was Australians coming here and getting on the grog and all that sort of stuff, and that didn't interest me that much. So just to drive into the countryside and see that and that vision, and I felt that day, you know, very comfortable with this place. It wasn't quite like I'd sort of found home or something like that, but it was just that. I suppose for me it was like, wow, the culture's still alive.
And before we get into the images, because that's obviously the photography, would you mind sharing a little bit about your career beforehand and what made you feel into photography?
Well, yeah, I mean, I was in the corporate world for 25 years, so perhaps some people in this room can relate to that. And worked with UPS for 20 years of that, and then another Australian company before that. So that was, well, maybe I'll go further. further back before all that, because I don't think that's actually that interesting. But yeah, way back to, I grew up in Wellington in New Zealand, and right from the age of 2 years, I think the wanderlust was there, because somebody left the gate open in my house in Miramar in Wellington, and when I was about 2 or 3 years old, and I had a little 3-wheel tricycle, and I saw that gate open, and off I went, and I rode that little tricycle, which probably would have been a huge journey for me back in those days, but I rode it from Miramar to the ocean, to this place called Lyell Bay. And my parents lost me. They had no idea where I'd gone, because nobody had seen me, so I trotted off on this 3-wheel tricycle, headed off down the road. And so they freaked out and called the police and all that sort of stuff, and I had half the neighbourhood looking for me. And they found me down at the ocean, sitting on my 3-wheel tricycle, looking out into the distance. So my mother's told me that story. So perhaps that kind of lust to travel was all way back in those days. And then I finished high school, and back in those days in New Zealand they talked about OE, which is overseas experience. So not so many people went to university back then. They would go on their OE, so you would typically grab a one-way ticket and head off into most people went to England, but I had a fascination with the States, with the US, and I started to read some books on the Native Americans, and I really had quite an interest in, of course, the beautiful environment. And I started listening to a singer whose songs was a huge motivation for me to go to where I ended up in Aspen, in Colorado, and there's many in this room who remember John Denver, so his music was a huge inspiration for me. He wrote and sang about this beautiful place in the Rocky Mountains, and sounded like a paradise. So I was pretty determined to do that. So I got a one-way ticket and went with a couple of mates to LA, and we got a Yank tank, as they called them back in those days, one of those big American cars, and drove around the West for about 4 or 5 months. And one of the places we stopped was in the Black Hills of South Dakota, and they were having what they called a survival gathering. So the Lakota Sioux, where land was under threat from uranium mining back in those days. And we stopped at this place for 3 days or so, and I guess that had a big impact on my life, actually. Yeah. I met some of the activists that were fighting for their rights, some of the Native American activists at that time, and there was a lot of people who come together for that gathering, and I met lots of environmentalists and all kinds of people, and I went vegetarian after that experience.
So would you say that's one of the turning points of you turning into the activist role? Sort of.
Well, I guess I was quite concerned about the environment and stuff like that before that, because I did volunteer work for Greenpeace back in Wellington before I went to the States, so more against the harp seal slaughter up in Newfoundland, and the whales, stuff like that was a big issue back in those days. So I guess I had a bit of a compassion for animals and wildlife and the environment before that, but certainly spending some time on the Native American reservation there was a huge impact.
And just one more question maybe about your past. In there you mentioned you kind of walked out as a kid in a tricycle for a few meters to the ocean, or kilometers maybe. But I also heard you've done a 20,000 kilometer bike ride. So do you want to just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, well that's true. So that's kind of interesting. So that's probably a good example of these crazy ideas that I get sometimes, and that's where they end up. But maybe the story starts with Steph here. Wife Stephanie's sitting in the front here, who I met, and so I was living in Aspen, Colorado, and I'd been there for the winter, and the spring came along, and I decided to stay on. And in fact, I was watching a horse race on television. It was the Preakness Stakes in the States. Anyway, I was sitting in the lounge of this place where I worked, and I heard this Kiwi accent behind me, and there wasn't many Kiwis, many New Zealanders in Aspen back in those days. I think I was about the only one, actually, or maybe 2 other guys, but played rugby. But anyway, so I heard this sort of accent, it's unusual, and I turned around and I looked at this woman. And I don't know, we hear about these kind of things of love at first sight or whatever, but that's what it was. It was amazing. I looked at Stephanie and it was like, whew. And I got this really powerful signal, or I don't know, communication from somewhere that I'm going to marry that woman. It was really, really
So you propose him first.
Well, no. So then I'll tell you a little bit more. That's really quite interesting. So anyway, so we got to talk and things like that, and then it was a big party scene back in those days, and we got to socialise and have fun. And anyway, then I was playing rugby, and there was a seven-a-side rugby tournament in Denver, and there was a guy who was in the rugby team, and he was going to fly. He was a pilot. He was only 19 or 20, so he was pretty young, but he was going to fly from Aspen to Denver. So I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll come with you, because I need to have a meeting with the Greenpeace people in Denver, and I'll go up a couple of days early with you for the rugby tournament. Anyway, so we hop on a Cessna 172, small aircraft, and take off and get over the hard part of the mountains, and then get off course. And we shouldn't have been where we were. We're at the higher part of the mountains, flying towards Stapleton Airport. We should have been in another area. Anyway, cut a long story short, we crashed. We ended up in this valley, we couldn't turn, and just the two of us in the plane, and I'm looking at him and thinking, are we going to crash at one point, you know? And he had this look on his face of like real concentration and seriousness as he's holding onto the control column of the plane. I'm like, oh shit, and there we are. So anyway, so I was listening to John Denver's music at the time, actually. The Eagle and the Hawk, or something like that, soaring through the Rockies, you know. Anyway, the next thing, boom, we hit. There was sort of a slope coming down off the I-70, off the freeway that goes up near the Eisenhower tunnels, you might know that area. So bang, we hit the ground, and the plane flipped and smelled all this fuel, and I thought, oh my God, it's going to blow up. And anyway, so I scrambled out of the plane, and managed to, and then Steve, who's the pilot, he got up and cuts all over, and I think we both had cuts and clothes torn and all this sort of stuff, like we'd been in war or something. So anyway, luckily we survived. We were taken to hospital that night. I had a sore back for a few days, but yeah, we survived that plane crash. And the amazing, remarkable thing was, of course, we weren't going to play rugby, but Steve was on the sideline, and obviously he was going to play on the Sunday when the tournament happened. And some guy got injured, and they, come on mate, can you play? Because we've got no one else. So we actually played rugby on the Sunday after the plane crash on the Friday. So yeah, so it was quite amazing. So anyway, so then I guess I kind of became a bit famous in Aspen back then, because I was in the paper and the Denver Post the next day and all this sort of stuff. And came back to Aspen to a welcoming party, and then I was sort of, and then Steve was like, wow, that was pretty impressive. You survived the plane crash. I want to know this guy. Anyway, so then we sort of got together after that and lived a wonderful summer in Aspen that year. And sort of some point towards the end of that summer, I travelled that previous year. I'd seen cyclists, cycling. Talked to a couple of them, and I thought, well, it's a really interesting way to travel. Yeah. So I said to Stefan, I said, she had this van that she owned with the girlfriend. I said, well, that she was going to sell. So I said, well, why don't we do this? Why don't we take that money and whatever money I've got, we'll buy 2 bicycles and we'll cycle from LA to Alaska, thinking that, well, she's not going to agree to that. I said, yeah, that's right. She goes, that sounds like a great idea. So the next thing, we got bicycles, mountain, well no, they weren't mountain bikes didn't quite come in there, 10 speeds or whatever they were, and we cycled from LA up to Seattle, and then we took a boat up to the southeast part of Alaska and lived up there for a little while, and then came back and really enjoyed it, and then we planned trips to other places. So we ended up cycling. One trip was from England to Turkey. That took about 4 months. It was 4 or 5 months. And another long trip we did was from England to Russia. Yeah. And that was really interesting because we cycled through Eastern Europe the summer the Berlin Wall came down. So it was like 1990, 91. And they had not seen any cyclists before. So here we were on these mountain bikes with these helmets and stuff like that. And quite fascinating because obviously on bikes you want to be in the countryside most of the time. Yeah, so we just had, like typical cyclists, a tent on the back and a couple of sleeping bags, and we were just cycling through Hungary, Czechoslovakia as it was back then, Poland, and then we would just sleep in farmers' fields and things like that. So we travelled for about 4 months on that trip, and we did some environmental activism on that trip. So we took this earth flag with us, and we got press wherever we travelled, and it was quite interesting travelling into Eastern Europe in those days, because we were probably some of the first people to see the environmental destruction that had taken place, because obviously those countries were totally closed off. And we went to this one town, and it was just hell, wasn't it? I mean, it was like, wow, it was just so polluted. And I never get seeing the river was running through the city, because they're just pouring all this industrial waste into the rivers. There was no controls. It was red. The colour of the river was red. So anyway, so that was quite a fascinating experience, I suppose, to see the impact of many years of communism in those countries. And then we took the earth flag and we unfurled it in Red Square in Moscow. So that was our plan, that was our goal, to end up in Red Square with this earth flag and unfurl the earth flag in Moscow. So
What was the reaction?
well, it was just very early days. I mean, the Green Movement had been very sort of underground at that point, but it was all coming out. So we met some of these green groups along the way. And then we were able to get a private invitation to stay with a family in the Ukraine, in a place called Krivoy Rog, which is south of Kiev. So we went there for about 10 days. Again, it's one of the first Kiwis ever to go to that town. And
What do they do with your accents?
well, fortunately, the lady invited us. She was an English teacher, so there wasn't too much of it. A lot of her students were her friends and spoke English, so that wasn't too difficult. We did a haka one day, I never forget that. It was school in the Ukraine, but yeah, that was a very interesting experience. And the thing was, I guess, that I never believed, all the stuff the politicians tell you and the leaders about, of course, the Cold War sort of coming to an end at that point. I always believed that if you connect with the people and everything else, that all that crap aside, that we're all the same, really. And that was a wonderful experience, because this family took us in and it was like love. I mean, they just treated us with such respect. And when we left, I'll never forget, we had this lunch on the last day. We were all in tears. It was such an emotional experience. So for me to be able to connect with these Ukrainian people, which was part of Russia in those days, and it was all about that, about the heart and the soul, and putting all the politics aside, and just being who we are, the respect for our culture and for theirs. And this woman, Mira, she was head of the People's Diplomacy Program, and she did some wonderful work. And another woman we met, Janet Costa, she'd walked across Russia for peace. So when I started, we started to connect with these sort of people. It was amazing, very inspirational.
So on this whole trip, what would you say, maybe for yourselves, was maybe to start to point? One was, what was the most difficult thing to see or experience, or the biggest challenge you had on the trip? And then what was the biggest highlight for you guys?
Oh, well, I think, the environmental destruction, I mean, it was just absolutely frightening. What we saw in the pollution, and then Ubud, I mean, they during the day it wasn't so bad, but at night, I guess they released a lot of the emissions or whatever it is and stuff like that, and the smell was just terrible, because that would burn your throat. There must have been so many deaths from lung cancer and all that kind of stuff, but all those numbers were buried and all that sort of stuff. So that was quite shocking, but it was also a time of hope, because, the Berlin Wall had come down, and communism sort of crumbled, and the glasnost, which they called it back then, Gorbachev was in power at that time. So it was, so there was quite a bit of hope as well, but it was a pretty desperate situation. But I think, achieving that goal of cycling to Russia and unfurling the earthquake, that was a really, really important thing, thing. And just meeting the people along the way, and as I say, meeting the green groups in Czechoslovakia and these places, because they had to sort of operate under, trying circumstances. They could have been killed or whatever. So they were all coming out.
And just on a personal note, because I'm curious about both of you, because I think you should. Oh, you can't hear me? I said I'm on a personal note, just curious about both of you, because you seem like very extraordinary people, individually as well as collectively. But what would you say was the biggest thing that you learned about each other?